Hi viewers, my name is Mr. XVI. I'm the founder of the Shepherd Foundation Resource Center. Our mission is very simple. We want to reach every art student in Zimbabwe. Today, I'm honored here at Shepherd Resource Center. I'm having Dr. Muso. Dr. Muso is the president of Association of History Teachers and Lecturers in Zimbabwe. Welcome to Shepherd Foundation Corner, Dr. Muso.
Thank you so much, Mr. Twala. How are you?
I'm fine, see?
Thank you so much. I'm so much humbled by inviting me to your show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muso. Okay, Dr. Muso, as I said, that our vision is very simple.
Yes.
We want to reach every student in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And in recognition that the world is transforming digital.
Yes.
So as Shepherd Foundation, we have got different platforms whereby we teach students, we historicize students.
Yes.
So I've got a channel on YouTube, I've got a channel on Facebook and TikTok.
Yes.
They can follow Mr. Istwala. So Dr. Muso, where can students follow you?
They can as well follow me on YouTube on Menas Musongelwa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Muso. You are also a digital teacher.
Yes.
Okay, by the way, all right, without wasting time, Dr. Muso, as we are revising, we want to revise the question on section B, and the question reads, Louis the 16th, this is a common name, by the way,
Yes.
if you're a historian.
Yes.
Louis the 16th character flaws
Yes.
were the main cause of the 1789 crisis in France. How far do you agree with this assertion? Like I always say, Dr. Muso,
Yes.
students, they must read the question so many times so that they can understand and identify the keywords.
Yes.
Let me take the question again.
Yes.
Louis the 16th character flaws were the main cause of the 1789 crisis in France. How far do you agree with this assertion?
Yes.
Dr. Muso, what's your take on this question?
We are focusing on the character, on the personality of Louis, and we are saying that when the flaws, when the character of Louis responsible for the revolution of 1789.
Oh, what a wonderful interpretation of the question.
Yes.
What is so basic, in order for you to answer this question, the character of Louis XVI contributed massively
Yes.
on the 1789 crisis in
Yes.
France, though there were other factors that also contributed. So basically, students, they must know that the character of Louis was not the only cause
Yes.
that contributed to the revolution of 1789.
Yes.
But there are other factors.
Factors.
So if they write that essay, that was going to be a balanced essay.
Yes.
So Dr. Muso, now we want to talk about the character of Louis XVI.
Yes.
But it is also important for students to note that in order for you to answer this question, it is an examination of the causes of the French Revolution. So we are going to link the character
Yes.
of Louis XVI
Yes.
to the causes or to the events, some of the events that are unfolding
Yes.
during the revolution.
Yes.
That we say this one, it is because of the character
Yes.
of Louis XVI.
Yes.
One of the things that I always say, Doctor,
Yes.
is that Louis XVI
Yes.
was a king by name, but not by character.
Yes.
You know, the problems that we face in France, Dr. Muso,
Yes.
Louis XVI was unable to
Yes.
stop the revolution or to avert the revolution.
Yes.
Not because because of anything,
Uh-huh.
but because of his character.
Character.
He was so weak-willed. So it is very important for students to note some of the characters that Louis XVI portrays whenever they read the causes of the French Revolution. So we are going to talk about the fact that Louis XVI he lagged well. What do you think about that? If I'm saying that Louis XVI he lagged well to either introduce or support able reform ministers.
Yes, he was always interested in outdoor pleasures, hunting, making of flocks, at the expense of sitting down, devising reforms that were going to revive the country. So that personality, that character on its own, it led people to be frustrated, people were angered, leading to the revolution of 1789.
And even failed, okay, that was good. You were talking about that he failed to introduce some of the reforms that were going to avert a revolution or stop a revolution.
Yes.
You said something which was very interesting, that you will go, for example, you will dodge some of the very important
That's true.
meetings and go for hunting in the expense of sitting down and devising ways to redeem France maybe from financial crisis.
Yes.
Or another thing maybe we can talk about, this guy also felt even to support reform-minded ministers. What's your comment on that?
For example, you talk about Neka and Tugot. Those ministers, they wanted to revive again, they wanted to change the political outlook of the country. For that to be possible, they were supposed to be supported by Louis. But what do we see Louis doing? He had to side, he had to work along with what the wife Mary Antoinette to dismiss these able reform ministers who wanted to bring new reforms that were going to revamp the economy of the country. So by so doing now, it led France to plunge into a serious financial bankruptcy, leading to the revolution of 1789.
To get on that, Dr. Muso, you know what, talking about the reform-minded ministers, I always say this: if you are a very good student, when you're writing about the reform-minded ministers, you have to highlight the reforms.
Yes.
For example, these ministers, for example, you talk of Calon, you talk of Neka, you talk of Turkey, like you said, Muso, they wanted everyone in France to pay tax.
Yes.
And remember, that on its own, actually, that system was going to tap wealth for the country.
Yes.
So, but Louis XVI, he continued with the system that was not tapping wealth for the country.
Right.
And those ministers, you talk of Calon, remember, he even called a meeting of notables. In that meeting with Calon, Calon proposed to the nobility, though it was a hand-picked nobility, that they must pay a land tax. Remember that the nobles, they were the one that were owning lands, right? And Calon is saying to them, you guys, you must what? Pay land tax. But what happened? The nobility, they revolted against such a reform, and Louis XVI, he was overpowered. This guy is a weak-willed king. He was overpowered by the nobility. But Calon was coming up with a good proposal to redeem France from financial crisis. Calon was coming up with a proposal to tap wealth for the country. But Louis XVI is following, is actually giving into pressure that is being executed by the nobility. That on its own, we are saying that the character of Louis XVI, it actually lacked well as a king. Why? Because he failed to back up people that came up with the projects. And what I always say, whatever idea that came up with these economists were projects that were there to save France from financial crisis. But what Louis XVI did, he killed the reforms of projects. So that on its own, we see that the character of Louis XVI also contributed to the revolution of 1789. Another thing about Louis XVI, he lacked self-belief. He lacked self-belief, which made him to lack political foresight. What do you think about that? Maybe we give reference to things like the Estate General. For example, I'm saying that he lacked self-belief, which made him lack political foresight. Maybe we can talk about something like give reference to the Estate General.
Okay, possibly before the Estate General, you can possibly refer to his age. You know, when Louis became the king of France, he was very young. Other books, they say that he was 18 years. Other books, they say that he was 17. He was very young. So that drive, that self-esteem, it lacked in him. So he did not have the spine to say that this should be done. That on its own, it again contributed to the revolution of 1789. Again, the wife, it is also said that Mary Antoinette, she was very young when she became the queen. So the ages of these people, again, they explain why they plunged France into the revolution of 1789. Then now, coming to the Estate General, we see that as a leader, you are supposed to have an agenda. You are supposed to call this meeting with an agenda. I'm calling you the first estate, the second estate, the third estate, to discuss 1, 2, 3, but not have that agenda. You haphazardly to call for this Estate General. Guess what? Problems are taking place because of the calling of the Estate General.
So I was right when we began this, Louis, and when we began this, Dr. Mosso, that Louis XVI, he was a king by name, but not by character.
Certainly.
One of the things, maybe let me add on the Estate General. Remember that one of the things, Louis XVI, by calling the Estate General, to me that was a plus. By calling the Estate General. Remember, it was 175 years. The Estate General was never called by anyone. But Louis XVI is coming on show and he's calling the Estate General, and people started to have hope on him. That, wow, this guy is calling a parliament something of some sort. But Louis XVI is failing to to solve the problems. Why? Because of the character. One of the things, remember, one of the major grievances, remember, he said people, they must prepare their cahiers, they must prepare their grievances.
Yes.
And there were more than 6,000 grievances.
Yes.
That was
So
just too much. There were so many, and they were coming from all angles, from the clergy, the nobility, and the peasants.
Yes.
But you know, the third estate general, they are the one who revolted, right? One of the things that they wanted, they wanted voting by what? By head.
Yes.
They also wanted a joint what? Session. And Louis XVI, as a king, was supposed to compromise on that if he had a political insight.
Yes.
But this guy, he did not have a political foresight.
Yes.
He did not have a political intelligence.
Yes.
Why am I saying so?
Yes.
Because he was persuaded by the nobility, he was persuaded by the clergy, he was persuaded by Mary Antoinette.
Yes.
Mary Antoinette was politically incompetent. How can you listen to a person who is politically incompetent to run the affairs of the government?
Yes.
That on its own, it paralyzed the government operations.
Yes.
Another thing, this guy also lacked wisdom. For instance, let's talk about the American War of Independence, the participation of, do you think there was wisdom then?
No, there was no wisdom at all. You knew that France did not have enough resources to participate in the war. And he was warned by Louis XIV not to involve France in expensive wars, but he could not listen to all that which he was given by his brother Louis XIV. So by so doing now, we see France now being plunged into a serious financial crisis as a result of participating in the American War of Independence. Again, you can also add and say that there was now parliamentary democracy in America. You knew that France don't have parliamentary democracy. So the soldiers who were going to participate in this war, they were obviously going to learn about the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and they were going to spread these ideas to the people. And these were the same people who were going to rebel, to revolt against him. So he lacked the wisdom, and guess what? Soon after the war, now we see so many problems taking place in France.
Okay, that's great. So Louis XVI actually, to add on that, is engaging in the American War of Independence, is engaging in that war in order to revenge the lost territories and the lost colonies during the 7 Years' War. So is going there so as to gain the glory, but in the expense of the economy, in the expense of the political arena, in the expense of the socially fraternity of the country.
Yes.
So Louis XVI is going to war, which actually contributed, which actually worsened the financial crisis. Why? Because he relied heavily on borrowing, and he was borrowing money with huge interest. But he didn't know where he was going to get the money to pay back the loans and the bourgeoisies and stuff. So that on its own, to me, I believe that it shows that Louis XVI, he lacked wisdom. Number one, that was a blunder to engage in that war, and the war had a bearing in France in terms of political, socially, and economical. How economical it worsened the financial crisis. Political, we know the soldiers, they were veterans such as Lafayette. They were enlightened. Actually, they were imparted with the political thought, like you say, like democracy. Another thing, socially, people were dying for nothing. They were dying to revenge. So Louis XVI wanted la glory, but he never actually sat down and he considered other aspects and other spheres of the country. So that on its own shows that Louis XVI was weak. And another thing, he lacked spine. What can you say that Louis XVI he lacked spine?
You don't get that spine to stand as a leader. That on its own, again, we see it contributing to the revolution of 1789.
Okay, so you lacked spine. So basically, these are some of the things that you can maybe discuss in your essay or talk about when you are writing an essay. Maybe make sure that you don't generalize. You give us some of the character about Louis XVI. For example, he was indecisive. You can as well talk about that. Louis XVI, he lacked self-belief, which made him to lack political foresight. You can as well talk about him lacking spine. You can as well talk about him lacking wisdom. There's quite a number of things, and then you link to an event during the French Revolution or the causes of the French Revolution, whereby you are saying that by this is the character of Louis XVI. However, you talk about other things besides the character, apart from the character of Louis XVI. It's not only the character of Louis XVI that contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. As historians, they argue that the French Revolution was caused by political, socially, and economical reasons. So it's actually a combination of factors that contributed to revolution of such magnitude.
Yes.
But let's go to the other side, to Temuso. Maybe you can talk about the role of philosophers. Remember, let me explain maybe about the philosophers. The philosophers, they contributed immensely to, though it was indirect, but they contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. We talk about the personalities such as Voltaire, we talk of Montesquieu, we talk of Rousseau. For example, Voltaire, he was actually attacking powerful institutions in France such as the church. By so doing, actually, he opened the eyes of the people to campaign against the church. Remember, people, they started to see the ill treatment, they started to see the injustice that was caused by powerful institutions such as the church. By so doing, the people, they gained courage to fight against the church, therefore leading to the revolution. And we can talk of Montesquieu. You know, Montesquieu, he actually advocated for separation of powers, whereby there was executive, there was judiciary, and there was legislation. That on its own, remember, those things were absent in France. So by so doing, he made people, that was a contagious idea. Why? Because France was ruled by an absolute monarch, a monarch without checks and balance. So in other words, when he actually advocated for separation of powers, he was talking about democracy. He was talking about a situation whereby the powers of the king were limited. But the powers of the king in France were not limited. By so doing, whereby advocated for checks and balance, whereby the people, they can check the executive, whereby the courts of laws, they can check the monarch. That on its own, it actually led to the French Revolution, because all these things were not there in France. We also talk of Rousseau. This man, he wanted the Declaration of Rights of Man. We know that in France, people were denied, people were abused. There was political abuse, there was abuse of rights. All those things, actually, the ideas of the philosophers, they actually contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution of 1789. We can as well talk about the poor harvest of 1789 to Temuso.
So many people were affected by the droughts of 1788. So many people died, and they expected the government to do something to assist them with food, but nothing was done. Instead, Marie Antoinette, she was quoted as saying, if they cannot buy bread, let them buy cakes. People were suffering, so they expected the government to do something, but the government could not do anything. So that on its own frustrated the people, again leading to the revolution of 1789.
You know what, Temuso?
Yes.
You know the poor harvest, actually they are short calls, they sparked the revolution. You know, they say in English that a hungry man is an angry man. You remember that during that period of the poor harvest, remember most of the people in France, they relied mostly on agriculture. So because of poor harvest, what happened? We see rural to urban migration. People, they were now moving to Paris, to big cities like Paris, and then they were going to look for what? For employment. But employment was unemployment, was the order of the day. So we see people, they were now joining squads. They started to form mobs, and these mobs, they played a crucial role during the French Revolution. Why? Because they did not get what they wanted. They did not get employment, so they started to form the Parisian mob. This is the part, or this is the group that played a crucial role during. We started to see some small scale revolutions during that time. So it's a sign that probably it also contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. It's after it started to build an atmosphere, it started to build a cloud of revolution, but in a small scale, which later on sparked to a bigger revolution. Okay, what else can we talk about? Maybe in the other factors.
We talk about the issue of taxation, economically playing also a part in this revolution. Taxes are being introduced. People were already burdened by so many taxes that they were paying, and more taxes were coming up. That again leading to the revolution of 1789.
So basically, the system of taxation was so pathetic.
It
was heavily shouldered by the third estate. At the same time, they were poor. That was paid, and they paid so many taxes. They paid the salt tax. If you read, they even paid the oven tax. So why is they were poor, and the system, it also failed to tape well for the country. That on its own, it's a system. And another thing, maybe we can talk about in maybe we are concluding our lesson. Maybe we can talk about the ancient regime itself. The ancient regime was the existing government, was the government of the day. What can you say about this government?
The ancient regime, we are talking about the despotic nature of the government. The system of government that was there, it was despotic in nature. Louis, he ruled as a despot. He ruled in total. What are we talking about here? We are talking about elections. They were not conducted. The elections were not done. Those that were done, we see that they favored the nobilities at the expense of the peasants. The peasants were considered, they were counted as a group whilst the nobilities, they were counted as individuals that on its own frustrated the people, angered the people, leading to the revolution of 1789. Then we can also talk about the system of justice. People were not tried by a jury. We see that those that not belong to the nobilities, they did not enjoy the type of system, type of justice that was in the country. You can also talk about the issue of newspapers being censored. Page 1, Louis. Page 2, the nobility. Page 3, the clergy. Clergy, you're talking about the bishops and the archbishops. So the censoring of newspapers again frustrating the people, leading to the revolution of 1789. Possibly, I can end by saying that we talk about liberalism. People are not free to express their thoughts or their minds. Liberalism, it was swept aside in the country. People were not free to express their thoughts. That again leading to the revolution of 1789.
Powerful, Dr. Muso. So basically, when you're talking about the ancient regime, we're talking about the old order, which was characterized by absolutism, whereby the king ruled by decree. Louis XVI was once quoted saying that I am the law, and a thing is legal because I wish it. I am the law, and the law is myself. A thing is legal because I wish it. Louis XVI, he ruled by divine rights of kings. Louis XVI was always right. No one checked the powers of Louis XVI. You see, so good people, there's quite a lot of things that contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. As we are talking about the ancient regime, one of the strongest expression of the ancient regime was the letter D Cadet. Like Dr. Muso said, that people that were issued with the letter D Cadet, they were jailed without trial. They were never tried. And the laws were confusing when you talk about the system of jury, the courts of laws, the laws were confusing. There were more than 400 laws in France, and they were written in Latin. People, they never understand the comprehension of the laws. The comprehension was beyond the ordinary citizens. So that on its own, it's a sign that there was disorder, there was inefficiency, and the government on its own was tyrannic. Thank you for listening to Mr. Twala and Dr. Muso, signing out.